Oh, how naive I was.
Big mistake. Big. Huge.
Biggest little mistake I've ever made.
Hey guys, Matt McKeever here. So today I'm going to do a video just focused on what were the biggest mistakes I've made in real estate investing so far. And so someone recently just asked me to do kind of a top 10 list of the biggest, most common mistakes that real estate investors make. And I plan to do that video as well, but first I figured I'd document the biggest mistakes I've made so far. And so I think that the mistakes that I consider my three biggest mistakes are actually going to surprise you compared to what you're probably concerned of as being the biggest mistakes that you're going to make as a potential real estate investor. So first, let's just talk about what I consider to be a big mistake. So to me, a big mistake is going to have a large financial impact on your future. It's going to really impact your ability to continue being a real estate investor, as well as your ability to grow your portfolio. So a lot of the common mistakes that a lot of landlords and real estate investors focus on are things like going over budget, having problem tenants. And so those are problems, and I've definitely had my fair share of them as well. However, those are really just speed bumps. They're not major obstacles on your journey as a real estate investor. And so by that I mean going over budget on a project by 10, 20, even 50%, although that may slow you down in the short term, if you're able to take away a learning lesson from that, it's not going to really slow you down on the long-term growth of your portfolio if you're taking the long-term view of it. So yeah, a lot of the common mistakes that most real estate investors focus on and really dwell on aren't really big mistakes. So going over budget on a renovation, putting in a problem tenant, missing out on a deal, getting greedy and missing out on a deal, being too timid and missing out on a deal, those are definitely all common mistakes, and I've definitely made them myself. However, those didn't really impact me on the big picture of things. And by that I mean, missing that one great deal where I could have made 100 grand had I been more prepared and executed properly on my negotiating. Yeah, that hurts, but that's not going to devastate me long term. Even something like going 20% over on a renovation, although that's not desirable and you don't want to make a habit of it, again, that's not going to truly impact your ability to continue to grow your portfolio. If that 20% going over on the renovation budget completely cripples you as a real estate investor, you're probably too leveraged already. And so that's probably the big mistake. And it's not the fact that that renovation came in over budget, it's that you were way too over leveraged to begin with in the first place. And so there's been times that I've been greedy and I've put in offers that are even below what I consider to be a reasonable offer just because I thought I could get away with it. And sometimes that'll spark the seller to drop their price dramatically in order to try and spark a bidding war in order to get the place sold for a reasonable price. And I've definitely made that mistake and I lost that property because I got greedy. But again, that was just a missed opportunity. That's not going to devastate my long-term real estate investing trajectory. And that's what I'm really focused on. Those are what I consider the big mistakes, the ones that are really going to hold you back. So those are the three we're going to focus on today. But don't worry, I'll still make a top 10 clickbaity list of common mistakes that real estate investors make when they're first starting out. But I honestly think that if you guys watch this video and learn from these three mistakes I've made, you're going to get a lot more value from it than a top 10 list or a top 50 list or whatever you want. Because all that stuff's already out there on the internet and it's not very authentic, to be honest. So before we jump into what my top three mistakes were, let's focus on what a lot of real estate investors are first concerned about when they get into real estate investing, which is renovations and budgeting. And yeah, it's difficult to budget and it can be intimidating and all that. But at the end of the day, even going over budget by 20% or 30% or 50% isn't going to cripple you long term. Most unexpected renovation costs, they're not truly massive, to be honest. Like a $5,000 surprise, while not ideal, shouldn't cripple you as a real estate investor. If a $5,000 hit would cripple you, you're probably over leveraged and shouldn't be jumping in at this point to begin with. Honestly, like big surprises like a new furnace, a new roof, all that stuff, it's not going to cost you much more than $5,000, or at least it shouldn't unless you're doing a really massive project. And so that's what I kind of mean. Myself and one of my mentors, we've talked frequently about how the more we grow in as real estate investors, the more we realize there are very few big deals, particularly when it comes to renovating. You know, structural things and foundations, yeah, those are truly scary renovations that can really rack up your budget. But outside of that, so hopefully you're kind of getting a feel for what I mean here. It's really just about most problems, honestly, are just small. And if you just take a breath, take a beat, think it through, plan it through, you're going to find a solution for it, and it's not going to really slow you down. And so before we get into my top 3 mistakes, let's focus on one other thing first as well. What I consider to be the top mistake the most beginning real estate investors make. And so that mistake is not deciding. And so that comes in 2 flavors. Particularly, the first flavor is an unwillingness to decide, and so they're offloading all decisions to another party. So instead of deciding to buy their first investment property, they're letting the real estate agent decide which should be their first investment property. And if you don't know enough, if you're not confident enough to be really running the numbers and understanding the numbers yourself, I don't think that you should be buying your first income property. I think you need to spend more time understanding the numbers, understanding the 1% rule, how to estimate costs, how to estimate repairs, and all that. The second type of indecision that I see from real estate investors is an unwillingness to commit. So once they've done their research, they end up in this analysis paralysis where they're just completely unwilling to take the leap and try and get their feet wet. And to be honest, at the end of the day, you gotta remember, actions always come before results. And so you're gonna get 0 results if you're taking 0 actions. So at the end of the day, you do have to decide to take the leap and get into it. But remember, most mistakes that you're gonna make along the way aren't critical. As long as you've done your numbers right, unexpected repairs and maintenance, troubled tenants, down economies, all those things may not end up getting you your ideal numbers, but they're not going to critically hinder your growth as a real estate investor either. Worst case, you're going to just be slower at accumulating real estate than you originally had planned on. But at least you're still accumulating real estate. And so before we get into the top 3 mistakes I've made so far, one more point I want to make is, how do you make less mistakes? Honestly, I think many mistakes are made by either just ignoring problems and letting them fester and grow into bigger problems, or it's by just being reactive. So you're not thinking through the problem at hand. So when you're first presented with a problem, take a beat, think it through, take a deep breath, take a day if you have to, depending on the scope and size of the problem. But think it through, try and figure out multiple different solutions to it, and then determine what's the ideal solution for your current situation. In addition, don't be afraid to reach out to your network and get input from individuals that maybe are more specialized in whatever your current problem area is. But at the end of the day, once you finish aggregating that information, you need to pull the trigger and make a decision and implement a solution. Alright, so let's get into Matt's big mistakes so far.
I made a huge, tiny mistake.
Number 3. So, number 3 biggest mistake I've made so far is a problem tenant. And so by that I mean, I got cocky. I rented out one of my units without doing enough due diligence on the potential tenant. It was a referral from a landlord and someone that I have do frequent work on my properties, so I thought I could trust him. I met with the tenant briefly. There was maybe 1 or 2 red flags that came up, but I was under a time pinch and I just kind of wanted to believe that things were going to work out because they almost always do for me. And so I was willing to just trust this referral and just took the cash, and the easy cash, and at the end of the day, I ended up with a problem tenant. And that's completely my problem. To be honest, you can approach problems in a couple different ways, but I think the 2 most common ones are accept responsibility or blame someone. And so there's all sorts of people I could blame for this issue. I could blame the person that referred me the tenant. I could blame the tenant for being a bad tenant. I could blame my neighbors and other tenants for instigating with this tenant and taking the problem from a small problem into a big problem. But at the end of the day, I'm the one that owns the property. I'm the one that picked this tenant. I could have done more work and found a different tenant for this property. So it's my fault. Completely my fault. So, how am I going to first fix this current problem tenant, and how am I going to avoid in the future? Well, a couple things. Avoid in the future is pretty obvious. It's pretty easy. I just need to not get cocky.
Great kid! Don't get cocky!
I need to focus on just implementing the systems I already have in place, doing my due diligence, and really vetting the tenant better. But again, this problem tenant, even in the big scope of big mistakes I've made, this is really just a blip. It's something that's going on right now, so it feels a little bit more urgent and bigger because I feels a little bit bigger and more urgent because I haven't had time to allow this to fade into memory. But guaranteed, a year from now, this problem tenant is just going to be a joke that I make to other real estate investors. And so, how do I plan to solve my biggest problem, number 3, my problem tenant? Well, I'm hoping to move her into a different unit in a different part of the city of one of my properties, and I'm hoping that that'll kind of move her away from the bad influences that's led her down this path to becoming a problem tenant. Because at the end of the day, her previous landlord still swears up and down that she was a fantastic tenant and that he never had problems. So I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. And now, maybe the reason I'm doing that is because I have the luxury of being able to be a bit self-indulgent like that and truly find a win-win. Maybe it's just because that's how I like to do business. And maybe I'm still being naive. I honestly don't fully know. I'll let you know how this problem develops, and we'll check back in a year from now and see what we see. I think you're going to find that with a lot of the problems you find as a real estate investor as well. Because, you know what, there's times where I've had problems and they felt big at the time. But even at the time, I knew that a week, a month from then, it wasn't going to be a big deal. I've had parents and tenants screaming at me on the phone, telling me everything under the sun.
Hopeless, heartless, fat-ass, bug-eyed, stiff-legged, spotty-lipped, worm-headed sack of monkey shit he is!
And most of the time, it just comes down to miscommunication. They maybe had different expectations than reality. Maybe I've led them to believe different things than reality. Who knows? But even then, usually people just want to vent, and after they've had the opportunity to vent, they've had the opportunity to present their side, they'll be a lot more accommodating to hearing your perspective, rather than if you try and talk over them and just... My biggest suggestion when dealing with frustrated tenants or frustrated neighbors or whatever the case is don't have an ego. Just listen to their perspective. Most people just want to be listened to. They want to know that you understand them and that their opinion and their situation matters. And it does. Their opinion and situation does matter. And it should matter to you as well. And that's truly how you're going to get the best win-wins. I don't know. This may all sound, maybe I'm not explaining this right. This may sound like super hokey or whatever, that, find that win-win and everything will be fine. There are people that are truly just assholes out there. That no matter what, you're not going to be able to break through that exterior and they're only going to be out for number 1. You're going to have to cut ties with those people when those situations arise. But the vast majority of the time, most problems, most issues come just from miscommunication. Let's get into problem number 2. So problem number 2 was not planning.
Your poor planning does not constitute an emergency for me.
And so by that I mean, when I first started getting into real estate investing, I wanted to get into real estate investing to earn passive income. That was my goal. I didn't really have a dollar threshold. I didn't really have a portfolio plan. And so I think that's honestly, this is what's actually really slowed me down from growing my portfolio better than I have. And a lot of that just comes down to trying to be a lone wolf. And I've just touched upon this in the past. Being a lone wolf is such a waste of time. Do not reinvent the wheel. Get a great team behind you. Get a great network of people that are as motivated as you are, and you're going to find success so much easier to obtain if you're not trying to do it all by yourself. I think you'll be a luckier person if you have a great team and a great network behind you than if you're a lone wolf. That's all I'm going to say, is you're definitely going to be luckier and have better results if you have a network and a great team behind you rather than trying to lone wolf it, regardless of how smart, how intelligent, how sharp you are. Fact. And so, what exactly do I mean by not planning? So, just a quick little brief history on my real estate investing journey. I plan to do a separate video completely documenting all of this, my past. But in 2010, I bought my primary residence and my first student rental. In 2011, I bought a second student rental. And in 2012, I bought my third student rental. And then, around that time when I bought my third student rental, it started getting really difficult to have banks lend to me because I was still relatively young, I was still relatively unproven, and I'd built up a pretty large real estate portfolio, and the lending rules at the time just weren't very accommodating to people that were going to have a large portfolio of investments in their personal name. So there was ways and manners that I could have planned more appropriately, and which would have allowed me to grow and really speed up the velocity of my money. But at the time, I was really just focused on doing this with two partners, and I wasn't really seeking outside feedback. I wasn't networking. I wasn't trying to learn from my peers. We were just in a very isolated ecosystem where it was just me and my two buddies, and we are just really focused on how can we do it. And so we weren't really focused on getting outside investors. We weren't focused on optimizing the structure of our purchases in order to allow us each to individually obtain the greatest number of mortgages, which would mean we'd be able to obtain the greatest number of properties, which would create the biggest portfolio and create the biggest passive income. And so we made a bunch of mistakes. We shouldn't have been buying our properties under three people's name and having three people on title and three people on mortgage. It made it very difficult to borrow because of the manner in which the banks determine gross income and net income on your rental property. They'll assume that you're responsible for 100% of the mortgage payment, but they'll only assume that you're capable of collecting a third of the rent. And so that really throws out your debt service ratio. And at the time, I was really hitting a brick wall because of this, which leads me into problem number one. So problem number one, problem number two are really related in this. You can maybe say it's a cop-out, but honestly, I think that they're the biggest problems that the average real estate investor is going to come across. And so not planning just means you're not really thinking big picture. You're not thinking long term. You're focused on the next deal. You're only focused on the next deal. Whereas if you were planning, you'd be focusing on the next deal, but you'd also know what the deal after that looks like and the deal after that looks like, and you'd know when, or you'd at least know when to expect you're going to hit that brick wall where the bank starts saying you can't buy any more properties in your own name. And so that's really important, really powerful. It's something you need to really be aware of if you're going to try and grow a large portfolio. And I wasn't at the time, and I should have been. And then when I did hit that brick wall, when I did have the bank say no, saying I could buy no more properties in my name, I could no longer continue to grow my real estate portfolio, I just accepted that no.
We don't take no.
No shit from anyone.
No.
We don't take no prisoners.
We don't take no for an answer.
Oh, yeah. We don't take no for an answer. We don't take no for an answer. We don't take no.
No.
Okie dokie.
No.
Gotcha. Thanks. Terrific. Thanks for your time.
And that was definitely the biggest mistake. So from 2012 until I think 2014, 2015, I didn't buy any properties because one bank had told me no and said I wouldn't be able to buy any more in my name because I had too much debt and I just needed to focus on growing my income and focus on paying down what I had. And once I paid off a couple mortgages, maybe I could buy some more. Oh, how naive I was. And so the big problem there is I didn't invest in real estate from 2012 to 2014, early 2015. So that was like 2.5 years, 3 years of just unproductive time. Like, sure, I was saving up money. I was building up a stock portfolio, building up my TFSA and my RSP. And there's value in doing that. And I was paying down lots of my mortgage debt by bumping up my mortgage payments and being very aggressive there. However, that wasn't really getting me to my end goal of reaching financial independence through real estate investing, which that was always my end goal. I just hadn't built a proper blueprint to lead me to it. I hadn't truly mapped out how I was going to achieve that, and that's completely on me. And so that really held me back as well, and it's unfortunate that it did because I wasted a lot of time. And the beautiful thing about real estate investing is time is on your side. Inflation, which, sidebar, this is assuming that we live in an inflationary environment, which based on current fiscal policy as well as the type of currency we use, I think is a safe bet. But inflation and time are on your side as a real estate investor. That debt is going to become less and less expensive versus the value of the property in an inflationary environment. And you're going to be growing the gap between what you owe on the property and what the property is worth. And that's what's really powerful about real estate. So that's why having it for as long as possible and holding it as long as possible is going to result in greater growth and greater return on investment. And had I been buying properties from 2012 to 2014, I'd have an even bigger real estate portfolio and be in an even better position than I currently am. And that's all just with hindsight. At the time, I was always just really focused on the next deal. And once I was told no by the bank that I wasn't going to be able to get the next deal, I just kind of shrugged and walked away. And I assumed that all the banks were the same. They're not. And had I been networking and had I been building up an appropriate team, I would have been aware of that. I would have had the resources and the people behind me to help me continue to grow. Where it wasn't until 2015 that I kind of decided, you know what, this is bullshit. I've seen so many people with so many larger real estate portfolios than myself continue to succeed. Why can't it be me? And then I started reaching out to people and I started learning from them. I really started networking, really started understanding how other real estate investors are doing it. I really stopped being a lone wolf. I got outside of the bubble of just me and my two buddies that were focused on real estate investing. And I really rapidly grew my knowledge and my networking and team base in that short period of time from 2015 to 2016. And it's been invaluable. So in summary, remember, my biggest 3 mistakes so far have been the problem tenant, which was number 3. And that was just me being cocky, me being lazy. Not planning, which was number 2. And so that was really just not thinking big picture, not planning appropriately, and not creating a roadmap that I could follow in order to guarantee my success. And my biggest problem was accepting no from the bank and just taking their word as gospel. To be honest, like, if the bank says no, that's fine. You're probably not going to be able to get a deal done with that bank. But there's other banks out there. There's credit unions. There's private money. There's hard money. There's RSP mortgages in Canada. There's all kinds of different ways that you can structure your deal, and you're just going to need to learn how to do that. And the way you're going to learn how to do that is by networking, by building a larger team and a better team. Find people that have done this before. Don't reinvent the wheel yourself. That's how you're going to succeed, guys. So yeah, so these are the 3 biggest mistakes I've made in my real estate journey so far today. Hopefully you got a lot of value from it. Hopefully you got some great takeaways from this video. In addition to that, I do still plan to do a top 10 clickbaity list of problems that most real estate investors make. However, that would take me a little while to put it out. But I think these 3 lessons here are the ones that you can learn the most from, or at least I hope they're the 3 you can learn the most from. So yeah, as always, remember, share this on social media. If you're getting value from it, share it on Twitter, post it on Reddit, post it on your favorite internet forum that's focused on personal finances. I really want to get to 500 subscribers, and I need to beat Matt Pichet. I'll do a YouTube update in the near future, but things aren't looking good, guys, so we need to double down and get me more subscribers. And yeah, until next time, remember, making money is a team sport. That's why you need to grow your network and why you need to grow your team. But until next time, let's just go make some money, guys. Thanks. Bye.